Treveri Cellars near Wapato is one of the only wineries in Washington to produce sparkling wine exclusively. We sat down with founder Jürgen Grieb and his son Christian to find out what makes their sparkling wine so different than the rest.
Okay, Jürgen, we're going to start with you.
Okay.
What's your background, family history, and what brought you here to the States?
Okay, I'm originally from Germany. I went to winemaking school and sparkling wine school in the late 70s. I came over in 1983 and worked for a Langguth winery in Madowa, which was a German winery. They brought me over from Germany to run their US facility. And then worked there till about 1987, then worked for a winery down the Lower Valley for over 20 years. And my passion was always sparkling wine. So my mom still today, that's all she drinks. And I learned that process. So we decided as a family to start making some sparkling wine. And my son Christian and my wife really talked me into do this commercially, because I did it always on, for us, and they just really pushed me to say, we need to do this commercially. So that's actually how this all got started. And we started downtown Yakima. We started opened up 2010, was November 23rd, 2010. That's when we opened the downtown Yakima winery, and then this facility came available. In 2012, we opened the tasting room, and now we're doing this all full time. We started with about 1,000 cases. Now we're about 15,000 cases. So we also sell all over in some other states, obviously, not everyone. But
how is it being a family-owned business and keeping it in the family?
What do they say? Blessing and a curse, right? No, it's every day's a great day to be able to come to work and spend that time with your family. I couldn't think of a better person to learn from than my father. He's been in Washington State for a really long time, making wine here for a really long time. So kind of figuring out all those little areas that produce great fruit for sparkling wine, he's been able to kind of find where those niches are, and that's been a real blessing for us since day one as we started getting out into the public and sharing our sparkling wines. That we had really good fruit sources was also really important for us as well. And additionally, just having that family lineage in wine for so long, I think we're really proud of sharing that with folks that it's been well over 100 years of Grieb family in wine and viticulture. So it's definitely something you can't escape or run away from if you're carrying the last name Grieb. But it also, like as in any business, there's just challenges too to work with family on a daily basis. But the important thing is taking those challenges and turning them into something good. And that's what we're trying to do with our sparklings.
Have you had a chance to go over to where your father was born and
Yes, so we do make a pilgrimage of sorts every year or two to visit Oma and kind of get her take on our sparkling wines, because it's just fun to sit and drink some sparkling wine with her. But it's also really cool to kind of experience the places where my dad learned, and then where my grandfather learned to make wine, and where they worked and the soils they worked in Germany, and then also being able to relate that back in your head of, okay, what are we doing now in Washington, and what do those soils look like, what do the plants look like, what are the differences, what are the similarities, and that is a really special thing to be able to make that connection between old world Europe and winemaking and the new world. It's not something every facility can say in Washington, so we're really lucky to be able to do that, make that connection.
what are you guys doing differently compared to a normal sparkling wine place, you'd say?
What do we do that's normal? That's the better question.
I would say what we do differently compare sparkling wine. I would say our wines are a lot more fruit forward than a lot of sparkling wine. They're a little less, still try to keep the complexity, but still keep the fruit note and have a little different balance in our sparkling wines than other sparkling wines, and that comes from my, heritage a little bit, because a lot of German sparkling wines have a little higher acid, and they're also a little more fruit forward than like French champagne. So we see some of the champagne houses in California.
I think additionally, we kind of make varieties that people, when initially on the surface, look at and say, oh, that's definitely going to be sparkling. For instance, we have a Syrah, sparkling Syrah, or sparkling Gewürztraminer, sparkling Riesling, Müller-Thurgau. These are all varieties where people kind of initially look at us with the piqued interest of, what is this and what am I looking at? That's the joy of this too, is we're making something different here that people can get an experience out of that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. In addition, it's Washington State fruit. There's not an abundance of Washington State sparkling wines out on the marketplace, so I think it's an identity that's still kind of in evolution here. Champagne's very much a dictated flavor, and Cava in Spain is a dictated flavor. Sparkling wines in Germany are dictated flavor. Our wines are unique. They're not quite like any of the other places. They're not quite like California either. So it's kind of got this unique Washington taste and feel to it. Mm-hmm. So not only the varieties, but also the soils and what those are giving us to make wine out of every year.
From the time you started, what are some unique accomplishments? I know we had talked, I know you have on the wall over there.
Sure. Yeah, we've been really, really lucky to just have some really interesting and unique people come through and try our sparkling wines and have our wines served at many different locations. Domestically, we've had our wines served at the State Department the last 5 or 6 years. They were just served at the Blair House for the elections. So that's where, a lot of the sitting cabinet and members of the presidential office go to take in the election results. So it's been really an honor to have our wines be not only part of Washington, but part of what we think is, the core of America, of what we're doing. And it's been a unique experience. But more importantly, like what we always like to say, the most unique thing to us is that just the regular person that we meet that comes in through the tasting room comes and buys our wine and takes it home and shares it with their family. Mm-hmm. And being a family business, it's really special to us that other families are enjoying our wine. So while it's really flattering to have, such big mentions of really big places serving your wine and really important people drinking it, to us it's equally as special, if not more special, that families choose to give their dollars and their attention to our winery and give us that vote of confidence. It's a really important thing for us.
When I came over it was 1983, it's really interesting how you see Washington State is changing. Back then, all we made was late harvest Riesling, really, really sweet Riesling. It was just 80% Riesling, there was a little Chardonnay, and very, very little red. So red wines. And I think what we all learned as wineries in generally, that Washington State is so unique. We have a lot of different climate in small areas, that if you plant the right grapes in the right area, we can make amazing things here in Washington. And I think, like Christian mentioned, me being here for 30 years, I know almost every vineyard here in Washington, a lot of vineyards in Oregon, that as a winemaker, once you learn this, which specific site, what you're trying to accomplish, we can really put Washington on the map. I mean, we already are, but we can really show our quality, not just in regular wine, but also with our sparkling wine, and really put Washington on the world map.
I think too, it's fun to play with the common notion and get people to think about it differently. Cabernet is the biggest red grape varietal grown in Washington State. What's interesting though is when you think about a growing region, just a specific area where grapes are grown, between here and Yakima and Richland, the Yakima Valley AVA is planted predominantly in white grapes, 60% white grapes. So it's not something that's talked about a lot. I think it's a lot easier to dismiss that fact and say, well, you know, I'm growing XYZ in the Yakima Valley. We do produce very interesting and beautiful red wines out of the Yakima Valley, but it's also important to note we have an abundance of beautiful white wine growing sites in the Yakima Valley that really haven't been talked about a lot. So it's kind of fun to, you know, rediscover that, so to speak. It is the oldest growing AVA. This is where it all started. So while other newer AVAs, you know, might be hot or the new thing, it's also unique to come back to where it all began and see the soils and differences, like you were saying, climates that make this little growing region what it is.
Going into the future, you guys you're growing some vineyards as well. What do you see? Where do you see this going?
I don't know. Where do you see it going?
This is an interesting question regarding when we started this in 2000, or actually started talking about 2008, how we're going to build Treveri. Our goal was to be in 10 years at about 10,000 cases. We already passed that in 5. So, I mean, obviously there's going to be a point where we're going to say this, you know, the buck stops here, but and we also, as we grow, we want to make sure we keep our quality, you know, that we keep what we have in the bottle and keep our product true to what we believe in. So, and that's sometimes, as big as you get, that gets to be a challenge sometimes. So at this point, we're still.
And I think the continuance of growth will be kind of discovery. You know, what Washington hasn't been able to do, and what we're hoping to be able to do for Washington is discover, additional sites that are really, really good sites for sparkling wine. AVAs that maybe haven't had sparkling wine made out of them yet, or perhaps it's untouched ground where it's not even an AVA yet. These are situations where I see us moving forward and kind of experimenting a little bit, finding fun, unique areas to produce sparkling wine. We kind of see ourselves as pioneers in sparkling wine a little bit, in the sense that, you know, we've taken risks and dares that maybe other wineries have not with their sparkling wines, and that's exciting to us to continue to do, because we've received that vote of confidence already from the public that that's what they like and that's what they want us to continue to do. So I think going forward, like you said, planning, putting some sticks in the ground, we'll definitely have some estate vineyards moving forward, and also, you know, maybe sites that haven't been touched yet in Washington or played with yet for sparkling wine. We're definitely excited about the opportunity to continue to make sparkling from areas people have maybe not thought of sparkling being made.
Any chance of just making wine?
There's no fun in that. You know, I never say never, but right now we're definitely focused on what we're doing. We really enjoy what we're doing too. I think if maybe for whatever reason, you know, when you think about changing what you're doing, you're either unhappy or you're running against the wall a lot with it. But we have not had that experience with our sparkling wines and making them in general too. So I don't think still wine would be, you know.
I think we are in that respect very unique in a sense, because that's all we produce. And you know, when people come here, they only get the sparkling wine, and people think this is really, really unique. And you know, like Christian said, never say never. But at this point, I don't think there's anything in planning about, you know, making still wine. And I mean, and in that respect, we do make still wine. We just make that then into sparkling wine. So we actually make wine and then make it into sparkling wine. You know, we're just selling sparkling wine. So.
Okay, so we are back here in production, and we're getting a closer look at what is called the riddling rack.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct. So what we do to make the sparkling wine is we put the wine with some sugar and yeast under a crown cap. So you can see there's a looks like a beer cap basically at the top. This is what traps all the pressure. One of the products of fermentation is CO2. And obviously as that yeast consumes the sugar, it will produce the pressure in the bottle. We lay the bottle down on its side like this for, you know, a couple years to let it age on the yeast. That gives it some sort of complexity and some flavor. Trick is you don't want to keep the yeast in there, otherwise it kind of looks like Hefeweizen beer or something similar to that, and consumers like their sparkling crystal clear. So back in the late 1700s, early 1800s, Madame Clicquot, Veuve Clicquot, you can still buy the brand today, she was kind of a kingpin, so to speak, in the industry and developed riddling. So she wanted clarity in her sparkling wines and her champagnes compared to everyone else's. So she developed this process. It's an A-frame rack, basically. And the trick is just by working the yeast will settle out to the bottom, and then you'll load it up into the rack kind of as such. And this is where you'll start. And then over the next 60 days, you do an eighth of a turn each day, and you keep doing the eighth of a turn, and you do it, and you do it, and obviously I'm speeding this up, and I'm not doing it quite accurate here, but the idea is you just keep turning, and the yeast will work itself down to the bottom of the neck. And when you flip it upside down, then you'll have all of your solids here at the bottom and clean, nice, crystal clear sparkling wine at the top. And then what we'll do is we'll let these bottles rest for just a couple days, and we'll take them in to be disgorged to remove that yeast. Nowadays we do it by machine. Yeah, the newer versions are not as romantic. No. But we couldn't keep up, but we did though. You know, everything in the rack.
So now we are in the bottling room, and this is the process after the riddling rack?
That's correct. So, you know, we were discussing, you know, riddling down the yeast to the neck. What we have to do then is actually freeze it. So I can actually pull this bottle out, and you can see there's an ice plug. What we have going on in here is a ice bath, basically, so to speak. It's sugar water, and we can get it down to about 5 degrees Fahrenheit. And we trap that yeast right up in here. And below is clear, clean, sparkling wine. So I have the yeast up here in this ice plug, and I have the clean sparkling wine down here. Trick is now we have to remove that yeast.
Okay.
So that's what this process is for. So I'm just going to actually throw, you know, 2 or 3 of these bottles on here at once.
And then what's the first process?
So what we're doing is just rinsing any residual glycol off, and that's just to make sure that the you know, the bottles are clean and ready to be disgorged. The first arm here actually will disgorge the sparkling wine. So what that does is it actually removes the yeast right there in that process. It flicks that crown cap off, that little arm does. And then all that yeast goes out. The first nozzle there basically is air. It calms the wine back down. The second nozzle is dosage, which is a sugar-based solution. So if we're adding sweetness back, we can do that. And the third nipple there is actually just for fill. So that's adding some of the wine back in. So, you know, as I advance this one more step, you'll see the dosage actually go in on the bottle. And the second, on the last bottle here, it'll actually start going in, and that's really dense. And you can see it kind of fall to the bottom of the bottle. Each of these wines then needs to be topped up to 750 milliliters. So it's actually a culmination. This right here is a culmination of 3 years in the making, so to speak. You know, we got to pick the grapes, we've got to ferment in the bottle, and then we actually have to remove that yeast. And the bottle age, of course, is the time in between there, and then we have to work that yeast back out. So now we've taken the yeast out, we have clean sparkling wine. Now we actually have to put, you know, a closure in it. Yeah. So I can't just send it out, you know, without a cork. So the next process is actually corking. So with corking, you know, the corks are oversized. What the goal with that is to keep the pressure in. The goal with the wire hood is actually to keep that cork on. There's no other goal of it, but you know, you have to consider these wines are under 90 psi even post-disgorgement. So the next process, what this does, actually shakes that dosage back up. So you kind of saw it fall to the bottom. If we just left it there, then it wouldn't really want to, you know, mix up. So we have to mix it up. So So when we shake the bottles up, that's just kind of mixing all that dosage together, and it makes the wine actually, complete at that point. It's got its finished sugar. So if I grab the wine, it's clear and ready to go.
So if I open that bottle up today, it'd be good to drink?
Yes, I mean I would give it at least a little bit of time, but absolutely within a time frame, then it's good to go. The next step is we actually just wash the bottles. So it'll get kind of loud for a second, but so I just turned that off so it's not as loud. But the idea is to get them nice and clean. They're ready for a label and a capsule. So that's what the next machine is purposed for, is the finishing. And wines are ready to go at that point and ready to ship out to the public once they get a capsule and a label.
What's this machine do as far as speeding up production?
Otherwise, I'd have to hand label and hand capsule everything. So the benefit of this is we're actually automating it. So I'm not putting each capsule on by hand, crimping it by hand, and then labeling it by hand.
How many more bottles are you able to go through per day?
Sure, yeah. We can do about 350 cases or so a day, cases 12 bottles. By hand, it would be a lot slower. I could probably only get like maybe 200 cases, so it's definitely less efficient by hand, and it saves my back.
This is true.
Yeah. So after this, they're ready to go. We'll box them up. We'll let them sit for just a little bit, and then we'll get ready to ship them out to the public.
About, you say 6 times a year, you offer a special tour that someone can come through and bottle their own.
That's correct. So, we generally don't offer tours on the weekends, mainly because our production is so busy, but we do a lot of time, about 6 times a year. We'll have a premium tour and tasting, and you can find those usually online on our online shop. And what we do is we bring folks back here and they kind of do this process exactly what we just did. And then we take them up for a tasting of actually 4 of our premium wines, some of which aren't actually available generally in stores. So it's a nice experience for people to come here to the winery, learn a little bit about sparkling wine, learn the process, and get their hands into it.
Yeah, and I will say, because I've done it before, you too are, along with the process, you're able to answer any of their questions, and you kind of give them a one-on-one unique experience.
And that's the goal. I think sparkling isn't talked about a lot. We generally know a lot about other winemaking processes as a public, right? Which is crush grapes, you get some juice, you make some wine, you maybe barrel it, and then you bottle it. With sparkling wine, there's the unknown. It feels like the dark abyss for a lot of people. So we like to, shed light onto that, bring people into the enlightened field of sparkling winemaking. It's definitely the most advanced winemaking process that exists. There's a lot of factors that go into it, and so there's a lot that you maybe wouldn't know about it unless you did come learn hands-on.
Yeah.
And that's why we want to offer that, is that people can get their hands into it and learn about the wine, in a different way that they didn't maybe necessarily know just by picking a bottle up from us or on the shelf.